Cedar Flat, Mesquite Bay. I tell you, the fishing last week was spectacular, especially toward the end of the week. We had 3 really beautiful days of weather, but this little cold front that blew in here over this past weekend, Sunday and Monday, changed things dramatically. We lost a lot of water. Water temps dropped, air temps dropped. If you were fishing Sunday or Monday, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But looks like the rest of the week, weather-wise, is going to be pretty manageable. It's going to be back up in the mid to upper 70s, maybe touching some 80s on a particular day. Winds are going to be right. So this was just a taste of what we have some coming in the future weeks. So just be prepared for that, and just understand that there's going to be different days for you, and there's going to be time frames where you're going to have to adjust and make different plans for what you had originally had thought about, where an area that you were going to fish. I definitely had to do that, especially on Sunday and Monday. But anyway, Cedar Flats has been pretty good for the most part. We still had really good water levels. Tides kind of leveled off to the most part, but they were still high enough that you could really fish these areas in and around Cedar Flats, the little island that's down here, the little pass that comes all the way out toward the bayou over into the Madre shoreline. All this, been spending quite a bit of time around the shell. It's one little back lake that dumps back off into here, and then of course down the shoreline and the big flat that comes out here like that. And been quite a bit of redfish and some pretty decent trout that's been hanging out over that and in that area. We just worked down these areas like this and just kind of worked around all the way up toward Bray Cove, the point where the Texas Parks and Wildlife place is. There's a little broken down pier that was there that got destroyed during Harvey. Nice little gut that's back in there behind that. If you fished that, you know where I'm talking about. Then we just kind of worked around, worked into Bray, worked on the edges out there behind the floater that's back in this area here. And then got back to the back lakes back in this area here. Worked this quite a bit. Just spent some time around that. If you fish this area very much, they're scattered. It's mostly grass, potholes, pretty hard pack. Not terribly hard pack, but it's hard enough. Like I say, a lot of redfish, a lot of trout that are hanging out there. A lot of smaller trout. We caught a bunch of the 13, 14s that are in there, but the redfish that we were catching were all pretty much lower to mid-slot redfish that were hanging out in there. No schools, not this past week anyway. We found, 1 or 2 here or there, maybe, 2 or 3 that were bunched up together, but other than that was pretty much it for the most part. Fished around some shell, fished around over the grass, try to focus more on the grass more than anything. Now with these temperatures, our water temp dropped. It got down in the low 60s toward the end of the weekend, i.e. Sunday and Monday. We'll see what the rest of the week brings. Otherwise, temperature-wise, as far as the air temps, it's going to rebound and come back up. So it should be pretty good for you. We wet-weighted most of it until Sunday got there and Monday got here. And we had to put the waders on them. Probably will stay in those from now on unless we just get a big heat wave that comes rolling in here and it bumps back up to 80s and the water temps come back up into the low to the mid 70s. Then we come back to wet wading. But for the most part, you probably just break your waders out and just stay with them for the rest of the winter time until we get back into March. But again, that'll be weather predicated for you. It just depends on what you want to do and how you want to go about that. The baits that we were primarily using, of course, it was around the big moon. We had some slow bites early. And then when we get into that minor set, our bites picked up. We primarily were throwing down souths in the burner shad, and there was a variety of colors because the water clarity was pretty clean for the most part because that's a nice protected shoreline. We had pretty much southeast breeze for the most part, and just worked these areas really well. Throwing the burners, throwing some top water as well. Had some good action with some top water this past week. We stuck some knock and tail, the original size burner shad, the mirror lure little johns, XLs were pretty good, double Ds were pretty good, but the burner shad seemed to be in a variety of different colors seemed to be the most productive for us. But it was around the minor. Before the minor kicked in, it was pretty slow. After the minor had died off, then it was pretty slow again. So you just kind of had to you knew that you were going to have about a 2-hour window in there somewhere when that bite was really going to pick up for you and take off. So that's really kind of what we worked on. That's how what we progressed with throughout this past week and into the weekend. So just kind of have a variety in your box. Now we're into the transition days, and that'll change somewhat. They may want a bigger bait. They may want to throw supermodel. You may want to throw the Pav lures. The little softy was one that did really well for us in the 5-inch rat tails. Did pretty well in that. And just is a variety of flavor. There's really wasn't any one particular flavor that was really stood out more than anything else. We kind of stayed with the more translucent color baits. The white ice did well for us in different baits in that. The Copperfield in the down south original side did pretty good. Twisted Tea did pretty good. But it was more your translucent stuff. So you like your red and gold glitter and the Mirror Lure Little John's, the kitchen sink is another one. And it's got gold. That's the one thing moving forward as we get into more wintertime, headed toward the middle and the end of November and into December, and in the new year. The gold, if you hit stuff with got a little bit more gold flake in it, whatever that may be for you, seems to be a little bit more productive during that time frame. So just FYI on that. So tie one of those on, whatever that may be, in any of the baits that I just listed, or whatever bait that you like to throw, whatever that may be. So if it's got a little bit of gold flake that's mixed in there with it, you probably will have a pretty productive day. But these areas like this, again, mud's going to be more your areas as far as structure that you want to be over. Grass is always the common denominator no what time of year it is. As long as you got some grass working in the areas, you can do pretty well based on what weather conditions are going to be. So that's really what we focused on. That's the areas that we really kind of want to work. And it for the most part, it paid off really well for us. Back over here off of Jaybird Point on the outside, just down from the Mott. Working the outsides, there's a lot of more softer sand in these areas, and you got some satellite grass beds, and you got some shale that's mixed in up and down the shoreline. Of course, a couple of the days we got back into Sherman's because we had the water levels that were still decently high. So when that happens, we get back in here in these back lakes here. I think Friday we fished in here, and that's the day that we had a lot of wind that was cranking. Bunch of redfish, just again, not a school. They were just scattered about all over the flat back in here, and in this particular back lake here in Sherman's. So we just kind of worked side to side, back and forth, worked the shorelines, worked out in the middle, working the potholes. Good solid trout. I mean, there were some nice 22 to 24 trout that were mixed in there, and they're starting to get thick and they're starting to get heavy. So that's what the colder temps will do. They'll turn these fish they really want to start eating and gorging to put on more insulation for the wintertime, because they know that time change has happened. And when that takes place, and you really have an opportunity to catch you a really quality fish. So we try to stay more in the middle, and we want to stay protected more than anything else, because on the day that we fished in here on Friday, this past Friday, it was blowing pretty well. So you can get in the lakes and you can protect yourself that way, and you don't have to take a beating. So we just kind of worked all these like that and slid back out and came back down to Spalding. Worked all the mouths that were out here in these little lakes that are back here. You got 5 lakes that dump out into the bite area, Spalding bite area. Got back in the lakes back here. This is I've said it many times, this is one of my favorite back lakes right here, because it's not super big, but it's got plenty of mud in there. It's got plenty of grass, and it's got shale mixed in there with it too. So it gives you the great structure for those fish to really want to hang in and about. So we located some fish back in these areas. Again, not great numbers, but it was quality fish. So that's what primarily what we were looking for. And a lot of mid-slot redfish, a lot of upper slot trout. When I say that, I'm talking 18, 19-inch fish in the trout. And then every once in a while, we'd pull out a solid 23, 24, 25-inch trout in there as well, and they're all thick. And so if you'll notice when you catch your fish, if you're fishing this upcoming week, you'll see the little sand leeches, if you will, on their bellies moving around. And that's a great indicator, lets you know that those fish are putting those bellies right on top of that mud because it's starting to, the water temps are cooling off, and they want to stay comfortable as long as they can. So that's kind of what they do. So if you got some deep water access close to these shallower waters like that, which a lot of these back lakes have deeper guts that run into them, and then it shallows up in the lake, those fish are hovering down on top of that mud. So it just kind of gives you a location where you really want to work those, and maybe what type of bait that you want to go. So like, for instance, a little softy is a great little bait. Working around this big moon, it did a great job for us this past week. That's just a slow sink bait, works similar to what soft dine does, and you can work it like that and let that suspend or hover down into that deeper water, and then it gets on top of that mud and stuff, and those fish, that's where they were coming from. They were coming off of that mud like that. And then, of course, if you're fishing a big grass flat, it's got potholes mixed in it too. We'd work it past the potholes and just let it hover down inside those potholes, and that's where we were catching our fish. So it did really well for us in working those areas like that. And, of course, once the water started dumping out in the early afternoons when that moon would set and starting to go under, that water was starting to pull out for us. So we'd move to the outer edges and work just a little bit deeper water and found our fish out in those areas as well. And it's pretty consistent. You know, for a big moon bite, outside of that time frame, the minor time frame was slow. But during the minor time frame, that's when we had our most production and caught most of our fish during that time frame. Again, weather was a factor toward the weekend. Again, Sunday and Monday it was, but other than that, it was pretty consistent. And that's all you can ask for when you got these different kind of conditions. We slid up into Carlos here a little bit and worked the inside shoreline when that wind kind of changed on us, so we get a little bit more protection there, and just kind of worked down this way toward Cedar Dugout. Back down here and fished around a little bit of shell. There's still some fish hanging around that. Not necessarily the bars itself, but kind of hanging off a little bit deeper spot. So that's where we found and located our fish, and that's kind of what we concentrated on. And again, same baits. We were throwing smaller profile baits so we could try to continue that bite frame for as long as we could. So it worked well for us this past week. So again, that's going to change as we get into transition days. So you might want to have a diversity in your box as far as big to small, and colors as far as what your water clarity is going to be. It'll be based on what color you do throw. In here in Swan, the Swan's a great little, it's not terribly muddy little lake there. There are spots in here that are extremely muddy, but we tried to work, more back shoreline toward the middle, all the way back down in here. Now, when you get closer to the little spoil islands that separate Copano Bay from Swan Lake, this back area back in here, it gets really muddy. So if you're not adept to that style of wading, you may want to stay out of that. But again, our water levels were such that we could get back in here, we could work these areas pretty well. And, we worked back in these and the little flat that's off of that. Now, one thing I always like to do, and I've talked about this before in the summer times and the winter times, you come out here on this edge when the water temps are pretty chilly. So I think Monday our water temps starting off in the mornings were, low 60s. So we would come out here on this edge and work this deeper water, throwing original size down south, throwing the burner shad down south, throwing the knocking tails, the Little Johns and the XLs, soft dine XL, throwing the little softy, and then they have one that's the big softy. It's very similar to what a corky does. And working this deeper edge until the water kind of started warming up, then we would regress and get back up into the flat areas, providing that we didn't have a lot of water loss. Now, the afternoons during this big moon, once that moon set, that water was really dumping out, so you had to kind of be careful how you kind of work that. So if you could stay in a thigh to waist deep water and you start dumping out and you start getting into your knee deep water, then you just kind of work the edges like that, and that way you could cover a big water column and find out where your fish are located. We're starting to see fish wanting to suspend and hang off that deeper edge early, and then slide up on those flats later in the day. So looking at the upcoming forecast this upcoming week, everything looks pretty good outside of Monday. Still going to be pretty chilly, but it looks like our temperatures are going to start rebounding by Tuesday. We'll have that south breeze start kicking back in for us, so it's going to start bumping those temperatures back up into the mid to upper 70s. So if you're not necessarily wanting to get up and get out there early in the mornings, and I say early in the morning, 6:30ish, 6:45, 7 o'clock, delay your fishing trip till 10, 11 o'clock and fish till mid to late afternoon. And you should have some good opportunities, especially over those muddy flats. And you get back in this area here, you're on this west shoreline. This is a nice little good muddy flat. And that's primarily what we're going to be focusing on for the most part moving forward is muddy grass flats. It's got deep water access close to it. And that's what these fish kind of want, and that's how they start to work. And we get all the way back in here into Port Bay and slide down this back shoreline all the way down to the point, not necessarily out to the 188 kayak ramp that's there, but this nice little flat all up in here. And depending on what winds you got, now it's a little bit more difficult to fish with a southeast breeze because it blows right into it. But when we've had these north breeze headed into the past weekend, it worked out really well for us. So you could work that whole shoreline into that flat. So we had decent success with it. Not tremendous amount. It was, again, primarily focused around that minor time frame. Then you could see that bite would taper off as you got further away from when that moon would set. So that was our game plan. In the days that we fished these areas, we executed for the most part pretty well and had a good amount of success in these areas. But that's the game plan for me anyway, moving forward, throwing artificials. So always key this time of year is pay attention to what that weather forecast is, depending on what day that you're going to fish or days that you're going to fish or time frame, whatever that may be. Paying attention what the tide's going to be doing and paying attention what your wind and what your temperatures are going to be, because it can get pretty wild out there in a hurry if you're not paying attention to that. So have a great week coming up, and hope all your fishing days are good catching days.